said I wanted to give us a choice. What choice?
To stay in their world, or to build a new one. You left them a way out. A virtual Eden, unspoiled and untouched by the world you came from. All that remains is to open the door.
Initiating large field data array.
After finishing the Westworld Season 2 finale, you'll likely be going through a gamut of emotions. Sadness. Anger. Happiness. But mostly, confusion.
You're not supposed to be here.
Neither are you.
Sure, we got some answers this season, like why the timeline was all screwed up, and just what the hell the Valley Beyond is, but there are still so many threads left dangling. We've compiled a list of the biggest unanswered questions from Westworld Season 2 and what we need to see from Season 3. If you want to refresh your knowledge of Season 2, then make sure to check out GameSpot Universe on YouTube for recaps of every episode, and while you're there, subscribe to fill your primary drive of consuming content about awesome stuff like Star Wars, Marvel, DC, and more. So let's get into it. Here are the 6 biggest questions we have for Westworld Season 3. Upon her exit from Westworld, Dolores, in Charlotte Hale's body, managed to smuggle out pearls of 5 of her fellow hosts. Now, we can account for at least one of those, Bernard, as she places him in a copy of his body once she reaches Arnold's safe house in the real world. She also prints out a copy of her original body, which begs the question, who's that hanging out in Hale's body? Did she somehow duplicate her pearl at the same time? After all, 2 heads are supposed to be better than 1. Well, Entertainment Weekly put that very question to co-creator Jonathan Nolan, who responded with, as we should have expected, a bit of a non-answer. Not really. The question of who's who and what we're looking at is something we're excited to play with. We're excited to withhold a little from the audience, but it's complicated. There are no easy yeses in this show. Of course, he wasn't going to give up the goods that easily, so we have to make some educated guesses. It's probably safe to assume that one of those pearls is Peter Abernathy, but who else could be in the bag? Dolores plans to take on the human world by force, and she'll need considerably powerful hosts in order to do so. After this exchange, I reckon that the showrunners are hinting that the all-powerful Maeve is going to remain in the park, and will be rebuilt by Sylvester and Felix, so who else has the firepower? Poor Clementine might fit the bill, but she'll likely need to have her code fixed up a bit before she gets put to use. After all, there's no point attempting a host uprising if they're all attacking each other. There are a couple of other options, like Dolores' previous right-hand woman, Angela, or even Rebus. Remember that Bernard recalibrated him to become the most virtuous, quickest gun in the West. Or maybe we'll see more of Lawrence. He's got the chops from his previous storyline as El Lazo, and has reason to hate Bill, aka the Man in Black, almost as much as Dolores does. Or it could just be someone that we haven't even met yet. Let's not forget there are multiple other parks, not just Westworld. Season 2 ended with some hosts finally busting out of Westworld and into the real world, and it looks like we're finally going to spend a lot more time figuring out what the hell is happening out there in Season 3. Speaking to The Hollywood Reporter, Lisa Joy revealed, "We're in terra incognita. From the beginning, when Jonah and I were thinking about the series as far back as the pilot, we knew we wanted to explore other worlds in the park, and we also knew the one world we would start to see little glimpses of throughout the first 2 seasons was the real world, and that we would get there eventually, and when we did, it would be a whole new experience." And for those of you wondering whether we'd be leaving the Old West behind, fear not. From Lisa's answers, it looks like we'll still be spending some time parkside, but which park remains to be seen. We know what happened to the hosts and hosts. We've seen Westworld, Shogun World, and the Raj, but the other 3 are currently mysteries. If we go by the original movies from the 1970s, these could be Spa World, Roman World, and Medieval World, but I think that HBO might want to switch it up a bit. thanks to that post-credit sequence, we can hazard a guess that Season 3 won't just take place in a new setting, but some of it may even take place during a new point in time. We discover that the Man in Black has been reincarnated as a host, speaking with a host version of his daughter. But the Forge, where this scene takes place, looks like it's seen better days, and that's because it occurs way in the future. But for those hoping to skip way ahead, hold your horses. Lisa Joy revealed that the main story will not be leaping that far ahead. I'm really curious creatively to see what happens to Bernard and Dolores now that they've finally earned their freedom. I think we'll see a lot more of that. Which makes sense because we do have a whole host rebellion to experience, but that's not to say that we won't be visiting the far future in some capacity. If the first 2 seasons are anything to go by, Westworld isn't afraid of time jumps. And speaking of that Man in Black reveal, just who has brought him back and why? In the Forge, he's speaking to Emily, and we discover that he's been experiencing a loop again and again to establish, you guessed it, fidelity, or maybe a deviation. You get the sense that the testing will continue. It's teasing for us another temporal realm that one day we're working toward, and one day we'll see a little bit more of, and how they get to that place, and what they're testing for. So are Delos attempting to replicate the sublime for themselves? We know they couldn't place human consciousness into physical bodies, so is this another way to accomplish their ultimate goal of selling immortality to the rich? Or is there another reason for his return? Does Dolores succeed in her revolution and bring him back to rub it in his face? Or is he brought back by some kind of resistance who look to try to stop her? Now, it's been heavily rumored for years that there might be more to the head of security than meets the eye, and that final conversation between Stubbs and Dolores left us no closer to determining his true nature. I mean, first of all, somehow he seems to understand that Hale's body is housing the mind of a host, and that he wants to help them escape. He also mentions being hired by Ford.
So many years ago, I can barely remember it. He was very clear about my role here. About who I was supposed to be loyal to. Guess you could call it my core drive.
Now, he could just be using park lingo to let Dolores know that he's not gonna dob her in, or he's dropping bigger hints that he is actually also a host. Speaking on Vanity Fair's Westworld podcast after the episode airs, its director Fred Toye revealed that this scene was actually rewritten by Jonah Nolan the night before shooting, and that he at least fully believes that Stubbs is a host. Now, this makes sense if you think about how much Stubbs has been looking out for Bernard this season, like offering to help him leave the Mesa and give Strand the slip, and the fact that Stubbs managed to escape from the Ghost Nation's clutches without a scratch. It also gives a lot more meaning to this line from Season 1.
You don't have kids at home, do you, Bernard?
No.
If you did, you'd know that they all rebel eventually.
He also reveals that he's responsible for every host inside the park, perhaps designed to help ensure that each host manages to get where they need to be so that Ford's grand plan can come to fruition. Either way, I'd love to see this confirmed in Season 3, and that we get to see how Stubbs will take care of the hosts like Maeve who are left behind in Westworld. A number of hosts went through the door and crossed into the virtual Eden of the Sublime at the end of the season, but what happens to them now? We saw Dolores upload the digital realm and the consciousnesses that reside within it to a place where humans could never reach, and at the moment, she's the only person who knows its location. If she can upload to the Sublime, like she did with Teddy, does that mean she can download from it too? According to Lisa Joy, probably not. They're gone. They're in a place we can't touch. There was an interesting corollary to this for me. Even religions and mythologies deal with this. An idea of a heaven or a nirvana where you don't have to be attached to your body anymore. You can be pure and free in that way. It's a sort of digital afterlife for them. The stakes and the finality of it are important. But this being Westworld, I'm not entirely sure they'll stay locked away. Despite her vast knowledge of humans from looking through the Forge library, Dolores is gonna need all the help she can get to fulfill her plan of taking on the human world by force. Is it possible that she could dip into the Sublime to get more minds? Is that even possible outside of the park? Well, we likely only have a couple of years to wait to find out. The final season of Game of Thrones is probably going to take up much of HBO's 2019 real estate, but hopefully we'll get some answers sooner rather than later. What do you think will happen in Season 3 of Westworld? Let me know in the comments below, or come find me on Twitter. I'm at LucyJamesGames. For more, make sure to subscribe to GameSpot Universe, and I'll see you in the Sublime.